Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Priyanka Neela Krishnan Show with me, Priyanka Neela Krishnan. And this is where we talk about enterprise data security, the way practitioners actually experience it without the vendor gloss and without the fear selling. And this is episode 37 in our enterprise security series. If you lead security, if you sit in the CISO chair, or if you are a business leader trying to understand where the real risk lives, you are in the right place. Quick note before we start, and I'll say it in every episode because it matters. Everything I share here is my independent commentary. These are my own views. Nothing in this episode is tied to any product, vendor, or employer. Today, we are opening a 10 episode arc and we are starting with the single most underestimated shift in enterprise security, the explosion of identities that were never a person at all. By the end of the next 15 minutes, you will look at your own environment differently because the thing I'm about to describe is already true inside your walls, whether or not anyone has measured it. For every person you onboard, background checked, trained, and gave a badge to, there are dozens of identities you never interviewed. Service accounts, API keys, tokens, bots, and now AI agents. This episode is about the identities that actually run your business and the fact that most security programs still act like the workforce is human. Alright, I am Priyanka Neela Krishnan, and this is an independent look at enterprise data security. And today we count the machines. For 2 decades, enterprise security has been built around the human user. We enforce multi factor authentication, that's MFA. We run phishing simulations. We do quarterly access reviews of employees. All of that is good work, and all of it is aimed at people. But while we were hardening the human perimeter, the population of the enterprise has changed underneath us. Every microservice, every SaaS integration, every automation pipeline, every cloud workload needs an identity to authenticate and act. Those identities do not get a manager. They do not get offboarded when a project ends. They do not sit in an HR system. They just accumulate. And here's the uncomfortable part. They now carry the access that matters. When an attacker wants your data, they do not need to trick a person if they can find one forgotten token that already has the keys. Let me make the size concrete. Palo Alto Networks put the ratio even higher in its 2026 landscape at 109 machine identities per human, up from 82 just a year before. And the majority of the newest ones are AI agents. So the population is not only larger than your workforce, it's fastest growing segment in software that can create more software. That should break your mental model. A human account always has a named owner who can be asked why it exists. Most of these do not. They were spun up by a developer for a task, wired into a pipeline, and forgotten. And they kept their access the entire time. Picture how most of us still reason about identity. We think of an org chart. We, a finite list of people, each with a role and a manager and a review cadence. That mental model is comforting and it is wrong. The real identity landscape is a swarm. It is thousands of credentials created by developers and platforms, and most of them non human, spun in seconds to make automation work. The problem is not that they exist, but modern business cannot run without them. The problem is the asymmetry of care. A human who leaves triggers an offboarding process. A service account created for let's say, a migration in 2022 is still there, still authenticated, still holding access nobody remembers granting. The left side of this slide is what we govern. The right side is what actually touches the data. Consider the offboarding asymmetry in numbers. When a person leaves, HR triggers a process and their access gets pulled. But researchers have found roughly 80% of enterprise identities have no owner in HR at all. Sometimes hundreds of thousands of accounts whose creator left while their full access stayed live. Those are called orphaned or zombie identities. And they are exactly what an attacker wants. A working credential that nobody is watching, tied to no one who would notice it being used. The left side of the slide gets an offboarding event. The right side almost never does. That gap is not a policy failure. It is a structural one because we never built a life cycle for the machines the way we did for the people. Here is the number that should reframe your whole identity program. 82 to 1. For every human identity in the average organization, there are 82 non-human ones. That figure comes from CyberArk's 2025 Identity Security Landscape, a survey of 2,600 security decision makers across 20 countries. So this is not one vendor's small sample, right? Sit with the ratio for a second. If you have 5,000 employees, you are effectively running an organization of more than 400,000 identities. And the CyberArk research found that nearly half of those machine identities have sensitive or privileged access. So the majority of your identities are not human, and a huge share of them can reach the crown jewels. Now, ask yourself the honest question. How many of those do you review each quarter? For most organizations, the answer is close to zero. Let me translate 82 to 1 into your calendar. If your quarterly access reviews covers your human users, and it probably does, then it is touching a little more than 1% of your actual identities. The other 99% go unreviewed, and a large share carry privileged access. Sophos research this year found that non-human identities were the root cause in 41% of identity-related breaches, and that two-thirds of enterprises have already suffered a breach through a compromised machine identity. So this is not a future risk, it is the present tense. The scale is invisible precisely because it is non-human, and invisibility is what lets it grow unchecked. Here is a test you can run this week. Ask your team for a single number how many non-human identities exist in your environment, each with an owner attached. In most organizations, nobody can produce that number, and the silence is the finding. You can name every senior leader in your company, but you cannot name the service accounts that can read your most sensitive data. The gap between what we track and what actually holds access is the whole vulnerability. The machines did not sneak in. We created them, one convenient integration at a time, and then we stopped counting. Governing them starts with the humbling step of admitting you do not yet know how many there are. The 82 to 1 figure is the average across all environments. In cloud native environments, it is far higher. Intro Labs put it at 144 to 1 in the first half of 2025, up from 92 to 1 just a year earlier. That is a 56% jump, guys. That is a 56% jump in the ratio in 12 months. And the raw count of non human identities grew 44% in the same window. This is not a plateau, it is a curve that bends up every quarter, and AI agents are about to bend it harder. One more data point that keeps me up: Git Guardian counted more than 28 million hard coded secrets pushed into public GitHub repositories in 2025 alone, a 34% increase year over year. Those are credentials sitting in public code for identities most companies cannot even inventory. The attack surface is not the network anymore, it is the credential sprawl. Two more details that show how ungoverned this is. First, a large majority of non human identities are not rotated within recommended timeframes, and only about a fifth of organizations have any formal process to offboard and revoke API keys. Second, the leak is often self inflicted. Andra found that 43% of exposed secrets surface outside source code entirely in logs, config files, and synced documents, places your code scanners never look. And roughly 1 in 20 cloud machine identities carry full administrative privileges. So you have a growing population of highly privileged credentials, rarely rotated, frequently leaked into places you're not watching. This is not a hypothetical attack path, it is a standing invitation. I repeat, so you have a highly privileged credentials population that's growing, rarely rotated, frequently leaked into places where you're not watching, right? So this is a standing invitation. So here's the shift I want every security and business leader to make. Stop building your identity program around the human headcount. The human is now the exception and not the rule. The right question is not who has access, it is what has access to what data and who is accountable for that access existing at all. I repeat, it is not about who has access to what. It is what has access to what data and who is accountable for that access existing at all. Right? That reframe changes your priorities. It means every non human identity needs an owner, the same way every employee has a manager. It means credentials need a life cycle with rotation and expiry and not a permanent existence. And it means your access reviews have to cover the 82, not just the one. If you govern the data and you govern the identities that reach it, the perimeter stops being the thing you're defending. The data is exactly what you're defending. Let me make the reframe more operational, right? Because owner for every identity sounds nice and vague. It means that when a service account is created, someone's name is attached to it. The same way a hire gets a manager. It means the identity has a documented reason to exist and an expiry date by which that reason is reconfirmed or the identity is removed. And it means your governance can answer in seconds what data this identity can reach. So ownership is tied to blast radius, not just to a name on a list. The organizations getting this right stopped treating machine identities as plumbing and started treating them as what they are: employees who never sleep, never quit on their own, and hold real keys. Let me make this practical because awareness without action is just anxiety. I don't want to give anxiety. I want to give some practical steps so you can get it executed. So there are three moves. First, inventory the non human identities and give everyone a human owner. You cannot govern what you cannot see, and an identity with no owner is the first thing I would schedule for removal. Second, give credentials a lifespan. A large share of non human identities are more than a year old with no rotation. Make expiry and rotation the default and no exception. A credential that lives forever is just a breach waiting for a date on the calendar. All right. Number three, review by access to data, not by what is easy to find. Rank your identities by what sensitive data they can reach and clean up the highest blast radius first. If you do these three alone this quarter, right, you will have done more for your real attack surface than another round of human access certifications. So that's more important than that one, access certification. So one caution as you do this, do not try to solve 82 to 1 with a manual quarterly review. The math will beat you because the population grows faster than any human team can certify. The organizations that make progress automate discovery and treat governance as continuous, not periodic. And prioritize ruthlessly. You will not fix every orphan token this quarter, so start with the ones that can reach regulated or revenue critical data. OWASP even published a non human identity top 10 in 2025, and the top entries are not exotic. They are improper offboarding and secret leakage. Boarding failures at scale are what actually breach companies. Fix the boring things first. Let me leave you with this. Your largest workforce does not fill out a timesheet, does not attend the all hands, and does not show up on your org chat. It is the machines. They authenticate around the clock, they hold the access that moves your data, and right now, most of them answer to no one. Governing them is not a nice to have, it is the difference between a program that secures the org you think you have and one that secures the org you actually run. In the next episode, we follow the axis outward, past your own walls, to the identities that are not even on your payroll. Your third parties, because your weakest link increasingly works for someone else. I am Priyanka Neela Krishnan. Thanks for watching. One last framing before we go. NIST and CISA released draft guidance at the end of 2025, specifically on protecting the tokens and credentials that machine identities and AI agents rely on. When the standards bodies write a document about your blind spot, the blind spot has become mainstream risk. So do not wait for a breach to make this real. The machines are already your majority workforce. The only question is whether you govern them on your schedule or on attackers. Alright, this is me, Priyanka Neela Krishnan, signing off. Until next time. Bye everybody. Stay safe, stay secure. So this is the source line from where I got the data. This is episode 37. If you take one thing from it, let it be this. Stop building your identity program around your headcount because the humans are now the exception and not the rule. Count the machines, give everyone an owner and a life cycle, and review by what they can reach and not by what is easy to find. This is the foundation for the whole arc, so it is worth getting right before we build on it. If this was useful, please do subscribe so the next episodes finds you, and share it with a person on your team who owns identity because they're going to want to know the numbers. tell me in the comments that what your machine to human ratio actually is once you go and measure it. All right. I read every one of your comment if you post them. And this is me, Priyanka Neela Krishnan. This has been my independent commentary on enterprise data security, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.